The raven came at dawn. It bore a black seal, not Lannister red, not Baratheon gold. The news inside made Catelyn Stark's breath catch in her throat as she read it aloud to her son. Tywin Lannister marches west to meet Stannis. King's Landing is vulnerable. She paused, eyes heavy with warning. They left the city in Cersei's hands. Robb sat quietly. Grey wind stirred restlessly beside him, sensing his master's pulse quicken. Ride for Harrenhal, his bannerman had urged him days ago. Take the fortress, starve them of power in the Riverlands. But that morning, the map was different. King's Landing stood unprotected, its soldiers drawn to the Blackwater Bay to fend off Stannis' incoming fleet. With Tywin gone, the capital was a ripe, rotting apple. One strong hand could pluck it from the tree. But to march on King's Landing meant abandoning the Riverlands, for now risking supply lines, risking encirclement, risking everything. Catelyn spoke first. If you take the city, you may win the throne, but it may cost you your men, your soul. Are you a Stark, or do you want to be a king of ashes? Robb didn't answer. He stared at the board, the little carved lion on the red keep. His voice came cold. I will not sit idle while Lannister children sleep safely in the palace my father died for. He stood, donned his sword, and the order rang out before noon. They would march south, not for glory, for justice. The road to King's Landing was painted in the colour of old death. Burned farms, hanged men, some with wolf banners, others lion. Deserters were more common now. Robb's army, tired and underfed, moved fast under cover of rain and fog. But news travelled fast too. Inside the city walls, Queen Cersei's hand trembled as she poured her wine. How many men does he have? She hissed to Maester Pycelle, who dripped sweat into the parchment. 10,000 foot soldiers, perhaps 3,000 horse, he stammered. More joining from the Riverlands. Then I will line the walls with wildfire if I must, she whispered. Joffrey, never far from delusion, raised his chin. Let him come. I'll have his head mounted next to that traitor's. His words drew nervous silence. Cersei didn't slap him. She didn't need to. The look she gave him was colder than any winter in the north. Robb didn't march like a rebel. He marched like a storm. Villagers opened their gates, not out of loyalty, but fear. The wolf banners filled the sky like a prophecy of doom. Women whispered of a northern boy with ice in his veins. Even some of the Stormland lords sent ravens pledging neutrality, but not all were with him. Lord Roose Bolton, ever silent and watchful, rode just behind Robb at all times, his eyes unreadable, his voice patient. Storming the capital is madness. You'll die on those walls, or in Cersei's wildfire. Let Stannis bleed them. Take. Harrenhal Robb refused. I will not let Lannisters write the story of this war. They reached the Blackwater River in 13 days. From the hills above, the red keep shimmered like a bloodied jewel under the setting sun. Grey wind howled as if sensing the madness to come. Men fell to their knees, some out of prayer, some out of dread. Robb Stark gazed down at the capital. He could almost see the throne, almost hear his father's voice. He looked to his bannermen. Ready the siege towers, he said. We end it here. No cheers followed, only silence. They knew the price of what he'd just ordered. That night, the stars disappeared behind smoke, and the wolf prepared to claw open the heart of the realm. Smoke lingered on the horizon like an omen as Robb Stark's army descended from the hills. The Blackwater Rush flowed like a thin, silver blade between them and the city, and across the water King's Landing. A broken jewel, a sleeping beast. It wasn't prepared. Tywin was still days away, marching his men toward Blackwater Bay to meet Stannis, unaware that a wolf had diverted from the woods and was now at the lion's doorstep. Robb stood on the riverbank, the mud sucking at his boots. Grey Wind proud. Beside him, teeth bared, ears twitching toward the sound of distant bells. Lord Umber spat into the dirt. Never thought I'd see the capital this close, with her skirts pulled up. But the joke fell flat. The men weren't smiling. Across the water, a few gold cloaks scurried atop the city walls. They weren't manning them properly. No signal fires, no archers ready. Not yet. It was almost too easy. Don't let the quiet fool you, Lord Karstark warned. It's not fear that holds their hands. It's wildfire. That queen will burn the city before she lets you touch it. Robb already knew. He remembered what Seer Roderick told him once. A cornered beast is the most dangerous. But this wasn't about burning. It was about striking before the enemy. Remembered how to fight. He turned to Lord Tytos Blackwood. Find me a boat, a small one, covered. Tytos blinked. You mean to sneak into the city, alone? I mean to knock on their gates with fire before dawn. That night, under the cover of fog, Robb led 20 picked men across the river in silence, each sworn to him, each armed for shadows. They rowed slow, not fast enough to splash, not slow enough to drift. The docks of King's Landing were quiet, too quiet. Smugglers had fled, fishermen gone. Only rats remained, and the occasional beggar too drunk to register the sight of the Northern Prince stepping onto the capital's muddy edge. They split into groups. Targets were simple: destroy the eastern gates, sabotage the armory, and unleash confusion. The true siege would begin at dawn, but chaos would open the doors. Robb and Grey Wind moved like phantoms through the alleys of Flea Bottom. The hound's eyes glowed in the dark like embers, sending more than one rat-catcher running for a priest. At the gatehouse near Dragon Pit, 2 guards leaned lazily on their pikes, laughing over some whore's rumor. They never saw the blade. By the time the guards hit the ground, Robb and his men had taken the tower. Flaming oil rained down on the city's own gates from within. The locks were smashed, the pulleys broken. The wolf had opened the way from inside the lion's cage. Back on the opposite bank, Lord Edmure Tully saw the flame burst and sounded the horns. The north was coming. The charge was fast, furious, by sunrise. The first line of Robb's foot soldiers stormed through the east gate with a fury only vengeance could buy. No siege ladders, no formal negotiations, only sword and blood. The gold cloaks broke in the first hour. The city wasn't ready, and now it never would be. Cersei Lannister awoke to the sounds of steel on stone and screams in the lower streets. Her bedroom door burst open. Seer Marin Trant stood there, red-faced and breathless. There inside the walls, Cersei rose, eyes glassy. Stannis, no. The Stark. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She simply poured herself a cup of wine and whispered, "Then let the city burn." By mid-morning, the city was ablaze. The poor died first, caught between retreating guards and advancing northerners. No one was spared. When panic struck, looters took to the streets, and fire crept through the alleys like a disease. Grey Wind led the charge through the market square. No lion banner held. By noon, the Sept of Baelor burned. By sunset, the Red Keep had shut its gates. the last refuge of the lion, and Robb Stark stood at the base of Aegon's hill, blood drying on his armor, watching the sun set behind the throne that had taken his father, his sisters, and now his mercy. "Do we storm the keep, your grace?" Lord Rickard, Karstark asked. Robb didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the towers above. Somewhere in there, Joffrey Baratheon still wore his crown, and Cersei still had wildfire. "No, Robb," finally said, "we dig in, cut the keep from water, from food. Let the lion rot in its cage." Lord Bolton's voice crept through like a cold breeze. "If you wait too long, Lord Tywin will return with fire in his hands." Robb turned, eyes darker than ever. "Then let him come." The stars over King's Landing vanished behind a shroud of smoke and screams. The once golden city bled in the streets, her alleys soaked in ash, her walls trembling under the weight of vengeance. The banners of the north now flapped from the gatehouses, grey direwolves snarling against blackened skies. For the first time in a century, a Stark army had marched on the capital and left it humbled. But the war wasn't over. The Red Keep stood untouched, a defiant silhouette against the chaos below. Cersei Lannister had sealed its gates the moment she realized Robb Stark was inside the walls. She had gathered her remaining loyal guards, sent Joffrey and Tommen into hiding deep within the castle, and ordered wildfire casks to be placed near every entrance. She would not surrender. Not to the son of Ned Stark. Robb stood just outside the courtyard of the Sept, or what remained of it. The air was thick with soot and the reek of death. Bodies lined the stairs, some with swords still clenched in hand, others with no faces left to show. He hadn't spoken in hours. Around him, his men took stock of the damage. Lord Umber returned with scouts from the harbour. The Lannister fleet's gone, burned or stolen by pirates. The people are turning on each other. It's a city without a heart now, Lord Karstark added grimly, but it still has teeth, and gold Cersei's hold up with what remains of the crown's treasury. She can buy every mercenary company east of Braavos if we give her time. Robb finally looked at them. We starve them. We cut the Red Keep off from the wells. No bread, no meat, no letters leave the city unless I see them first. What? Of the people, Edmure asked. They've nothing left. If we lock the keep down, the rest will rise in desperation. Let them, Robb said coldly. They need to remember what fear tastes like. The Lannisters took my father, my sisters. The North burned while they feasted in silk. Let them choke on the same fire. Inside the Red Keep, fear crept like a serpent through the halls. Cersei sat on the edge of the Iron Throne with a goblet of arbor red in her hand. Her eyes were swollen from sleepless nights, but her mind was sharp, poisoned with defiance. Seer Meryn Trant knelt. The lower floors are running dry. The kitchens are nearly emptied. Some of the guards are talking of desertion. Then flay them alive and hang their skins on the gates, she whispered. They'll learn silence. Behind her, Grand Maester Pycelle coughed weakly. Your Grace, if I may, there are rumours. They say Robb Stark has your son. Joffrey, don't say his name unless you want your tongue nailed to the wall. Pycelle shrank. Tommen whimpered in a dark corridor below, hidden with sceptre. Mordain and 3 terrified maids. The Child King had cried himself into silence. The Queen, however, had only just begun to speak to shadows. By the 4th day, the city broke in half. The starving poor stormed the storehouses in Flea Bottom. They found more rats than bread. The gold cloaks had all but vanished. Some joined the Northerners. Others were dragged into the gutters by the mob. One burned man cried, "The wolf has brought the long night," before throwing himself from the top of Visenya's hill. Robb watched from the walls of the old dragon gate. Grey Wind sat beside him, still and alert. The beast had taken a wound to his flank 2 nights before, but moved like nothing had happened. "Is this what victory looks like?" Edmure asked, unable to meet the boy king's eyes. "No," Robb said. "It's what truth looks like. We've just never seen it without the mask." On the 6th day, a raven arrived. Its message was short. The wax seal was black, broken with a shaking hand. "Tywin marches, 30,000 strong, 3 days out." Silence fell in the war tent. Lord Roose Bolton, finally smiling, leaned forward. "The lion returns to his den, my king. If he strikes while you're still rooted in the city, your line ends here." Edmure's face paled. "We need to retreat, regroup, hold the Riverlands, and bait him into open field." But Robb was already standing. His hand rested on his sword. "I didn't come here to run." He looked around at them all, every bannerman, every doubting eye. "I came here to end a war." At midnight, Robb Stark ordered every torch in the city lit. He lined his men across the Blackwater Bay with siege towers. And he sent a final warning to the Red Keep: "Surrender before Tywin arrives, or we burn the gate down with every last barrel of pitch in the city." There was no answer, only silence. And behind it, the ticking of the war's final breath. The Red Keep remained silent. No raven returned. No white banner fluttered from the towers. The Lannisters had chosen to rot in silence rather than kneel to a northern boy with a dead father and a starving army. But Robb Stark had not come this far to wait. At sunrise on the 7th day, he gave the order. The pitch barrels rolled forward, dripping oil onto scorched stone. Arrows were wrapped in cloth and dipped in flame. The war horns sounded across Aegon's hill like the roar of ancient dragons. "Fire," Robb whispered. The first volley hit the outer gates with a sickening crack, and then came the fire. A wall of orange rose into the sky as pitch ignited, burning so hot the wind curled like it was in pain. From within, the Red Keep began to scream. Cersei stood at the top of Maegor's holdfast, her hair undone, a goblet of wine clenched in her hand. The flames licked the base of the gatehouse. Smoke was seeping through cracks in the lower halls. One of the wildfire caches she'd ordered buried had already caught. The green flames had torched 3 of her own guards alive. She turned to the maester's apprentice beside her. The old man had died in his sleep, and said, "If he takes this castle, he takes my son." The boy flinched. "They say he's just, that he's not like the others. Then they've never seen a Stark's justice," she spat. "He will parade Joffrey through the streets in chains, just like they did to Ilya's children. Don't talk to me of justice." Below, the gate groaned and snapped. They were coming. Robb didn't lead from the rear. He rode at the front, sword drawn, Grey Wind snarling beside him, ash clinging to his hair like a crown of smoke. The gates of the Red Keep cracked beneath the battering ram like old bone. The last of the Lannister loyalists met them in the courtyard, a final, desperate stand. Robb didn't wait for a formal call to arms. He and his northern guard descended on them like fury itself. Steel clashed against steel. Men screamed. Grey Wind tore through the gold-cloaked remnants like cloth. Robb fought like a man possessed. His sword sang through the air, clean and precise. He killed Seaborrow's Blount himself, cutting the man down as he raised his sword in surrender. No mercy today, Not in this house. Cersei saw them break through the courtyard from the tower window. She turned to the last maid still standing, a girl no older than Sansa had been, and handed her a vial of dark liquid. If they breach the door, you pour this down the boy's throat. Then your own, the girl cried. Cersei didn't blink. Robb reached the base of the throne room stairs as the final resistance broke. He kicked the heavy iron doors open with a roar. The chamber smelled of old fire and blood. The Iron Throne waited, empty, and beside it, Joffrey. The boy king stood pale and shaking, his crown crooked, eyes wide with hatred and tears. 2 guards knelt beside him, their swords cast away. Cersei stood behind him with a blade to his neck. You take 1 step forward, she hissed, and I open him like a letter. Robb didn't move. He lowered his sword just slightly. Where's Sansa? He asked, his voice low and cutting. Cersei laughed bitterly. Gone, sold. A Stark girl's only worth her womb to these dogs. Robb's knuckles went white. Let the boy go. He doesn't deserve your madness. She narrowed her eyes. No, but you do. All of you northern scum. My father warned me. Let wolves in the gate, and they'll eat your children in their beds. The blade touched Joffrey's throat, and then, from behind her, a soft click. Grey wind had slipped past the chaos, flanking the long stairwell, quiet as death. He lunged before Cersei could scream. The queen fell backward, the knife clattering against stone. Joffrey shrieked and ran straight into Robb's arms. The war was over in less than a minute. The Red Keep fell before noon. The city bells rang, not for mourning, but confusion. The people didn't know if a king had been crowned or a queen had been murdered. The gold cloaks re-emerged, now wearing wolf sigils pinned to their armor. The throne room was sealed, and for a time there was silence. Robb sat in the chair his father had never touched, his hands stained red, his crown not yet forged, and his enemies crushed beneath ash and steel. But peace did not follow, because Tywin Lannister was still marching, and the wolf now wore a crown in a city that hated him. The first raven arrived at dusk. Tywin was less than a day away. 30,000 men, hardened, disciplined, furious. Robb Stark stood atop the walls of the Red Keep, watching the horizon darken. The wind smelled of salt and smoke. He hadn't slept since the gates fell. His crown forged from melted Stark steel and Lannister gold, taken from the treasury, rested heavy on his brow. He had taken the city, but now came the part no one ever wrote songs about holding it. Edmure Tully stood behind him, armor dented, face pale from days of battle and rot. We can't hold the city against Tywin in the state it's in. Half the people want us dead, the other half want bread. They'll get both if we let the lion in, Robb said. I'm not saying run, Edmure replied, but maybe meet him outside the gates. Show strength. Fight on our terms, Lord. Bolton stepped from the shadows. As always, or, he said softly, we open the gates. Let him see what we've done to his house, what his gold bought. He won't find a city to reclaim, only ash and corpses. Maybe he'll think twice. Robb turned slowly. You've never met Tywin, have you? Bolton smiled with no warmth. I've read his victories. Robb's jaw clenched. He'll burn this city again just to deny me the throne. We either kill him here or we die. Inside the city, the streets were quiet. The fighting was over, but the people hadn't cheered. There were no flowers, No songs. The small folk were too broken to celebrate. They just watched. Watched the wolves walk through their shattered homes. Watched the starving children dig through blackened storehouses. Watched the lions burn. Robb passed through them in silence. No guards at his side, no herald to shout his name. He walked through the capital as if it were his tomb. Eyes followed him, some full of awe, others full of hate. One old woman spat at his feet. Another king, she muttered. Another. Killer with a crown. He said nothing. He didn't need to. That night, in the throne room, a trial was held. Not by law, not by faith, by fire. Cersei, Lannister, bound in chains, bloodied, half mad, was dragged before Robb and his bannermen. She stood proud even then, her eyes daring anyone to pity her. "Where's Joffrey?" she asked, still crying under a table. "He's alive," Robb replied. "He'll stay that way if you don't open your mouth again." Roose Bolton leaned forward. "And what of her, your grace?" "Queen Mother, kinslayer, conspirator, mother of the Butcher of the North." Robb stared at her. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "I don't want her blood," he said at last. Cersei smiled faintly, victorious for a second, until he added, "I want her memory. Take her to the black cells. No light, no mirrors, no visitors. Let her rot with her name." She screamed curses until her voice broke, dragged away into the depths of the castle she once ruled. By dawn, Robb had gathered his commanders. A single plan: meet Tywin in the field, kill him, end the war. They couldn't wait in the city, not with stores low and tension high, not with starving mouths and angry small folk behind them. Robb would ride out with half his strength, 10,000 foot, 3,000 horse. The rest would hold the walls, led by Edmure. The next battle would decide the future of the realm. If they won, the North would rule the South. If they lost, the South would erase the North. At midday, Robb mounted his horse just outside the city gates. Joffrey, gagged and bound, was carted behind him in a caged wagon. A symbol, a message. The Lannisters don't rule here anymore. Catelyn had begged him not to take the boy. "You'll make him a martyr," she'd said. "A frightened child chained like an animal will not win the realm's love." Robb had said only one thing: "I don't want their love." Then he rode out, and the gates of King's Landing closed behind him. They met Tywin Lannister 2 days later, in the hills above the man. Robb's scouts returned pale and shaking. Tywin's force was even bigger than they'd thought. 35,000, with siege equipment and fresh banners from the Reach. But Robb didn't flinch. "Every army has a spine," he told his men. "Ours is made of northern ice. Theirs is gold. We break it once, and it never heals." At sunrise, both sides arrayed on the field. The boy king in wolf's armor, the old lion with fire in his eyes. 2 legacies, 1 grave waiting. The sky over the Manda burned pink and gold, a cruel beauty above a battlefield waiting for blood. Robb Stark sat astride his horse at the front of the northern lines, his men stretched wide behind him, a sea of spears and silent eyes. They were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. No walls, no river to defend, only steel and will. He stared across the valley. Tywin Lannister's army gleamed like a forged machine. Perfectly formed ranks, siege towers at the rear, catapults already in place. Banners of red and gold fluttered in the wind like arrogance. Their discipline was terrifying. Not a wasted movement, not a crack in the line. At their center, sat on a tall black destrier, emotionless. Robb could almost feel the man's gaze, even across the field. The lion's silence screamed louder than any war horn. Back in the camp, Catelyn Stark knelt in prayer, though her hands trembled with rage more than faith. She had begged her son not to march, begged him not to face Tywin in open ground. "You're not just fighting an army," she had warned. "You're fighting a lifetime of Lannister gold, patience, cruelty. You are your father's son, not his ghost." But Robb had only kissed her hand and said, "If I don't stop him here, he'll take my head, your grief, and the North." In one breath. She didn't argue after that. What use was fear when the sky itself already mourned? Robb rode along the front of his lines, helmet tucked under his arm, voice raised just enough for his soldiers to hear. "I won't promise you songs," he said, "or glory. This isn't a bard's war. This is the fight they never tell you about, the one that ends it." He paused beside Lord Umber, gripping the man's wrist. "Tywin fights with gold. We fight with names. Your fathers are watching. So are your sons." The men pounded sword to shield, steel to will. The first horn blew from the Lannister side. Their cavalry moved early, too early. Robb noticed. At first, a full flank of knights riding toward his left, heavy, armored, glowing in the sunlight. "They want to break us early," Karstark muttered. "Let them try," Robb answered. "Draw them in, then cut them down." Lord Blackwood raised the banners, archers ready. As the Lannister cavalry charged, the Northerners held tight, tense, grounded like stone. Just before impact, Robb shouted, "Now!" 1,000 arrows screamed into the sky, and the golden charge met a wall of death. On the right flank, Bolton's men unleashed their traps, spike pits, camouflaged trenches, wildfire barrels, stolen from the city. The Lannisters didn't see them in time. Screams filled the air as horses flipped and men were dragged into flame and mud. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. But it wasn't over. Tywin didn't flinch. His second wave came stronger, 3,000 foot, all armored, all angry. His center surged forward, unshaken, unmerciful. Robb's men began to bend. Amid the chaos, Robb charged directly into the heart of it. No Kingsguard, no standard bearer, just a northern boy with fury in his veins, and a direwolf beside him that looked like death. Grey wind tore through the Lannister line like it was paper. Robb's sword moved faster than thought. He wasn't fighting men, he was fighting memories, vengeance, ghosts of his father's execution. The field ran red, but so did his own side. Tywin saw the gap forming in the Stark center and sent his final wave. 10,000 men. The hammer. It was enough to break any line. But Robb didn't retreat. He turned to Karstark and said, "Now." From the eastern ridge, a horn blew. The Vale, Lord Jon Royce, and 5,000 knights from the Vale poured down the hill like a thunderstorm. Steel met steel with terrifying force. The Lannister line shattered under pressure from both sides. Tywin's hammer became the anvil. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, outhought. His expression never changed, not even when his men began to break and flee, not even when the direwolf came for him. Robb rode straight at Tywin, sword clashing with the lion's guard. Tywin fought like a man who had already buried kings. Cold, efficient, no rage, just calculation. "You're your father's son," Tywin said as their blades locked. "I'm no one's son anymore," Robb spat. Their swords danced. Tywin's blade nicked Robb's shoulder, But Robb didn't stop. He parried, cut, and then, with a roar that split the air, drove his sword through the lion's gut. Tywin gasped, coughed blood, but didn't fall. "You win," he whispered. "So, what will you do with it?" Robb stepped back, blade dripping, and watched the man who broke Westeros fall to his knees. The battle was over before the sun set. The Lannister army scattered, thousands dead, thousands more captured. Robb had done the impossible, broken the realm's most feared commander in open battle. When he returned to King's Landing, he didn't ride through the gates with fanfare. He came with Tywin's body on a cart, and Joffrey's cage behind him. The city didn't cheer. It just waited, because the war was over. But peace would be bloodier still. They called him the Wolf King now, not in reverence, but in fear. Robb Stark returned to King's Landing a victor, dragging behind him the corpse of Tywin Lannister and the broken remnants of an empire. He had crushed the South's strongest army, shattered the myth of Lannister supremacy, and left the Lion's banner trampled in northern mud. But victory bred silence. The people didn't line the streets. There were no cheers, no flowers, only stares. Starving, hollow-eyed, bone-thin stares from the city that had once roared for Robert Baratheon and spat on Ned Stark. Now they looked upon the wolf and saw not a savior, but a conqueror. A boy dressed in blood. In the Red Keep, the Iron Throne still stood cold and jagged. A chair made for dragons, now claimed by a Stark. Robb sat upon it only once, briefly, as if testing its curse. The metal cut his palm. The blood dripped slowly, down to the stone floor. He wiped it clean and stood. He had no desire for it. He had only taken it so no one else could. In the dungeons below, Joffrey Baratheon screamed. The boy king was no longer a king. His crown had been melted into the steel of Robb's own, a gesture both symbolic and cruel. His cells stank of sweat and urine. He had cried until his voice broke. He begged for his mother. He begged for Sansa. He even begged for mercy. Robb granted him none. "You burned the North," he told the boy through the bars. "You laughed while my father died. You ordered children hung and mothers raped. You don't deserve a clean death," Joffrey whimpered. "What do I deserve? To be forgotten," Robb said. "And you will be." The city council was convened in the scorched halls of the Red Keep. What remained of it? Catelyn, Stark, Edmure, Tully, Jon Royce, Lord Blackwood, Roose, Bolton, and a few scared minor lords of the Reach sat around a table still stained from Cersei's reign. There was no wine, only water and fear. "What happens now?" Edmure asked. "You've won. The crown is yours." "No," Robb said. "The throne is broken. I won't wear that chain." Lord Royce frowned. "Then what? Who rules the realm?" "We hold the capital, the gold, the prisoners. We hold the realm in our hands." "I don't want the realm," Robb said. "I want the North." Bolton's voice, always like a slow knife, cut through. "You'll never hold the North again if you abandon the South now. You took King's Landing. If you give it up, they'll never forgive the shame." "They never will, anyway," Catelyn whispered. "He's not their king. He's their punishment." Robb stood. "Then let them fear me, not worship me." He made his decree that night. King's Landing would not be rebuilt for kings, but governed as a neutral city. The Iron Throne would remain empty. Each region would rule itself until a new great council could be called. The North would return home, free, sovereign. He did not declare himself king of the Seven Kingdoms. only king in the north, but not everyone agreed. Lord Mace Tyrell, freshly returned from Highgarden, refused to kneel. He branded Robb a usurper, a butcher, a boy with delusions of peace. His words travelled across Westeros, carried on gold and bitterness. In the Reach and Dawn, warlords whispered. In the Vale, some murmured about taking the throne for themselves now that the lions were broken and the wolves retreating. And across the narrow sea, dragons stirred. That night, Robb stood alone in the throne room one last time. Grey wind padded beside him, calm but alert. The Iron Throne loomed like a monument to suffering. Catelyn entered softly. She had aged 10 years in 10 months. You did what you had to, she said. I did what no one else would, Robb answered. But I don't know if that makes me a king or a monster. She touched his cheek. You're a Stark. That's always meant both. At dawn, the North rode home. The city gates opened without ceremony. The Wolf King and his men passed. Through, in silence, no trumpets, no banners, just the sound of hooves on broken cobblestone. Behind them, King's Landing smouldered like a graveyard. Ahead of them, winter waited, and the future, whatever name it wore, would remember. This march not as a conquest, but as a warning. Years passed. The fires in King's Landing were extinguished, but the scars remained in the city, in the realm, and in the hearts of those who lived through Robb Stark's Southern War. No king had ruled the 7 kingdoms since. No one dared. The Iron Throne remained cold and empty, now shrouded beneath black velvet and surrounded by silence. It became less a seat of power and more a monument, a tombstone for the age of dragons, lions, and wolves. Bards stopped writing songs about kings. They sang, instead of fire, betrayal, and a northern boy who marched to the gates of hell and walked away without looking back. Robb Stark returned to Winterfell, not as a boy, nor as a king, but as a man. He bore no golden crown, only furs stitched by northern hands, and a sword that had tasted too much blood. The North received him with cautious joy. Some feared he had changed too much. Others saw only the boy who had avenged Ned Stark, but all of them bowed. He reigned not from a throne, but from a long table in the great hall. He walked among his people, spoke plainly, and ruled with a kind of brutal honesty that reminded them he had stared down the greatest powers in Westeros and left them broken. He never married. He never spoke of love again. Some whispered that his heart had turned to ice when the capital burned. Others believed he still searched for Arya and Sansa, both missing since the fall of the South. Neither was seen again. Joffrey Baratheon died quietly in the black cells of the Eyrie 5 years later. Starved and mad, still calling for a crown that never fit. Few mourned him. His name was scrubbed from books. Even gold couldn't buy remembrance. Cersei never left the dungeon beneath the Red Keep. Her screams had long since faded into mutterings and silence. She was no longer the Queen Regent, just a ghost in stone. The realm fractured. The Reach became its own kingdom under the Tyrells, who crowned Margaery as the Queen of Harvest. Dawn closed its borders. The Iron Islands tried and failed to take the western coast. The Vale remained neutral, too shaken by the war and too afraid to bleed again. But none challenged the North. They remembered the boy who took the capital by fire and fury and left before the ashes cooled. Years later, a group of maesters journeyed north to record the truth of the War of the 5 Kings. They sat with Robb Stark in the Godswood, where snow fell gently on his shoulders, and asked him the question history couldn't answer. Why didn't you take the throne? Robb looked up at the weirwood tree, red leaves falling like blood into the snow. Because every man who sits it thinks he can tame it, he said. But the throne doesn't serve men. It feeds on them. And I'd had enough of bleeding. One Mester dared to ask, "Then what did you take?" Robb looked at him, a tired half-smile on his face. "I took the cost, so no one else would have to." He died one winter night, many years later, quietly in his sleep. Grey wind curled at the foot of his bed, both of them scarred, greyed, and at peace. He was buried beside his father, not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as a Stark. And the tale of the wolf at the gates passed into legend, a warning whispered from fireside to battlefield. Do not awaken the North, for when it marshes, it does not stop.